Let's go to the next part here on the Facebook files. This was actually released by Congressman Jim Jordan as a result of some requests from the House Oversight Committee and other things that were uncovered, emails directly between Facebook, aka Meta, and the Biden White House. Let's go and put up some examples of what we learned. He says, quote, Facebook files, part 1. Smoking gun docs prove Facebook censored Americans because of the Biden White House pressure. Let's go to the next one here, guys, please. They say, quote, what did the Biden White House want removed? A meme. That's right. Even memes were not spared from the Biden White House's censorship efforts. One of those is that you can see here is the meme from shared on Facebook April 4th, 2021. 10 years from now, you will be watching TV and you will hear, quote, did you or a loved one take the COVID vaccine? You may be entitled. So that's including the Leo DiCaprio meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Let's go to the next one in terms of what was removed. They say, quote, to appease the Biden White House, talking points were actually drafted for Nick Clegg, that's Senior Vice President of Government Relations at Facebook or Meta. They say Facebook was ready to tell the White House it had demoted a video posted by Tucker Carlson 50% actually in response to White House demands, even though that post did not violate any policies. The fascinating part about this is they actually draft in this talking point. While we remove content that explicitly directs people not to get the vaccine, as well as content that contains explicit misrepresentations around vaccines, we reviewed this content in detail. It does not violate these policies. However, they say that the video is receiving 50% demotion for 7 days and is in the queue to be, quote, fact-checked. Let's go to the next part here as well. It says, and this is from Michael Schellenberger, they show you specifically one around the lab leak, and this was an email saying, quote, can someone quickly remind me why we were removing claims that COVID is man-made? And here is a direct response from email. Quote, we were under pressure from the administration and others to do more. So you have explicit examples here, Crystal, 4 separate ones that we just showed you of memes that were being taken down, videos that were being secretly demoted while they were being waited to, quote, be fact-checked, and then the lab leak one where I love that. A guy inside the company is like, hey, why are we demoting this again? I thought it was true. Isn't it true? And they're like, no, it's because we were under pressure from the administration. And you know, now that I'm thinking about it, it reminds me of an example. I believe Zuck was on Lex Friedman's podcast where he talked about how a lot of the pressure on his company to censor COVID information ended up being true. Yeah. Specifically, he pointed to lab leak. And now we see the actual emails that he was referring to, that they were being lobbied by the White House, by the administration around this. And I mean, the gross part about it is it all happened behind the scenes. We're finding out about this freaking 2-something years. It's July 31st, 2023, almost more than 2 years after some of these emails were actually sent to this company. Yeah. We had no idea in real time.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. That's why in some ways the like demotion that happens behind the scenes is more nefarious, because the Hunter Biden laptop situation, we knew what they did at Twitter. It was clear. There was an ability to have a public outcry and investigations, whatever. Like, we didn't know that this content was being demoted by 50% for a period of 7 days, et cetera, because it all happens behind the scenes. So, you know, it's useful to see the way that this actually works. I thought perhaps even more revealing were some of the exchanges about, first of all, Facebook actually worried that suppressing or outright censoring vaccine hesitancy content would lead to a kind of a Streisand effect where people, you know, felt like since they were being censored, what they're saying must be true, that there must be a government cover-up to force them to take the vaccine, that they were on to something, that they were being silenced, et cetera. You had a draft memo to Facebook leadership which said there may be risk of pushing them further toward hesitancy by suppressing their speech, making them feel marginalized by large institutions, which I think ends up being pretty prescient. And then there was another piece where they were weighing how to respond to the administration's censorship requests, which they didn't really want to go along with. But they said, given the bigger fish we have to fry with the administration, data flows, et cetera, that doesn't seem a great place for us to be. They're referring to them being at odds with the administration over censorship requests, so grateful for any further creative thinking on how we can be responsive to their concerns. So you see the way this works. Facebook had other things that they wanted from the administration vis-a-vis their business, and I think this had something to do with European data flows. And so they were kind of willing to like, all right, well, we got to throw them a bone on the censorship that they want so that we can get this other piece of our business. And that's the way this works. It reminds me of the conversation we had with Jack Dorsey, of course, you know, formerly of Twitter, who was talking about the intense pressure that not just our government, but governments around the world are putting on Twitter all the time to have various content suppressed and outright banned, and how difficult it is to stand up to all of those requests. So this is not to like, absolve Facebook or whatever whatsoever, but you can see the way that this works and how the government throws their weight around to get what they want from these companies.
What also disgusted me is there's actually a series within these about a discussion between then Vice President of the company, Sheryl Sandberg, and Nick Clegg after, if we'll recall, President Biden publicly said in July of 2021 that Facebook, quote, is killing people. That tongue lashing, not even a specific request, actually caused massive consternation within the company and an official reevaluation, Crystal, of policies around COVID-19 content, including from these officials like Nick Clegg, Sheryl Sandberg, all the way up to the level of Mark Zuckerberg. The simple fact that they were being criticized by the president for quote unquote killing people was enough for them to take an internal reevaluation. So it's not even just the pernicious remove this, remove that, remove this. It's when you directly put pressure like this on these companies, you are effectively asking for a total difference in policy. That's not illegal, but you're the full force of the government. I mean, I'll never forget, probably the most extraordinary moment in censorship that's probably ever happened, under the Biden administration, was Jen Psaki being like, if you've been banned from one platform, you should be banned from all. It's literally dictating content policy across everything. And, the second part there about the drafting talking points for the senior vice president of Facebook, that's crazy whenever they're talking about the demotion. I mean, and in many ways it validates so many things that you and I know intuitively. You and I do a video about Epstein, and it gets like 50,000 views and it gets demonetized. And you're like, well, I mean, was it the day? Like, was it not? What's going on? Nobody knows. It just, it exists into the ether. And you're like, maybe it didn't hit that day. Maybe it was something else going. Maybe people didn't care. Certainly possible. But then a part of you has to think like, no, but maybe, usually people do care. Actually, I know that there's a lot of people who care about the story. And, we don't care as much about views here for money or anything, but, it's nice to get exposure. And you think like there's something odd that's happening with the coverage of this, but you can never get it confirmed.
You start to think you're a little crazy.
You do start to think you're crazy. You're like, why is this happening? Why overnight your subscribers, on YouTube drop from like hundreds a day to like 5, and you're like, what? And then, they just tell you, they're like, that's normal, it happens. I'm like, really? We've been doing this for 4 years and never seen it happen. Also happens around the time you're covering Discord leaks. Who knows? It's one of those where like, you just don't know whether it's real, whether it's not. And I think that's the most pernicious aspect of it all.
I think that's right. Yeah. And that's part of why, if we had some rules around really clear transparency, that would be helpful. So you could at least have journalists digging into this if any journalist was actually interested. I mean, there are some in the independent press who, of course, will be taking a look at that. That would be useful. The fact that you had this federal judge go against the Biden administration and basically say, listen, you have to stop doing this. Like, you can't use your government power to try to censor the speech of American citizens. That's a good direction to go in. But, getting granular here on exactly how this works. And there's always two levels to it. On the one side, it's very dystopian and very nefarious and really clear cut on the issue of like lab leak, where even the Facebook employees are like, why were we doing this again? This idea that it was, potentially man-made. So it's very dystopian and nefarious. And then it's also sort of ridiculous because they're trying to censor like memes about vaccines that are pretty innocuous and probably not really, changing anyone's minds in particular. Or in the case of Twitter, we know they were censoring these accounts that had like 2 followers and some tweet that got like 1 like on it. And it's like, why are you spending your time doing this? Don't you have bigger fish to fry? So a lot of that absurdity also comes out in these files.
And they're censoring true information. I mean, look, and that's the problem, on lab leak, even on vaccine. I mean, listen, you can say, whatever you want, but like at the time they were actively pushing to go against anybody who was like, it doesn't stop transmission. We remember that from Fauci, the clip of him walking around. Guess what? That's false. It's just not true. And so, at the time, it definitely you should have erred on the side of actually free and open, because if we'd had that discussion, maybe they would have changed their vaccine. Maybe they would have been more honest, and maybe, sure, it may not have had the desired immediate effect, but that's not your job. And that's just not, they refuse to come from a place of first principles And instead, they come from a place of like immediate power and what they want to try and, hack the mind of the electorate. This is really what Fauci was a master at. And what they never really understood is that in a long enough timeline, that the more that happens, that you always come back to a default position effectively of, I feel like I'm being lied to and I'm not getting the full story, which means I don't trust you at all, even when you do say things which actually are true. That's the end result. And I think that's where we're at now. That's why people don't believe anything that's being said here.
I think that's right. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.